people, how you doing? So, it's time for us to finally dive into the camera comparison between the S22 Ultra and the Xiaomi 12 Pro. Man, I've been waiting a while to do this and we can finally do it now. It's gonna be a fun time with these two and well, I mean, there's not really much to say here because they are sort of different in terms of their camera specs. So I think the best thing we can do is just jump right in and check out the differences, or rather the nuanced differences between these two. Okay, so before we begin, I want to change things up slightly. So what I've done here is basically I've used these cameras as any normal person would. Essentially, I haven't focused too much on, crazy harsh conditions and, forcing backlit situations or stuff like that. And well, surprisingly, despite not going too crazy, the differences are still present and there are quite a few things to keep in mind. I mean, not in this image, it's obviously a tie. There's only like a mild difference in like the saturation of the sky maybe. But other than that, I mean, there's a simple shot and both are doing an incredible job as you'd expect. This one, however, with yours truly in it, I think I like the S22 Ultra here more. And it's a very simple reason. If you look at my face, you'll see that it looks brighter and less detailed, or rather smoother, on the Xiaomi 12 Pro. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of that. I feel like the S22 is keeping a much more natural skin tone, and I mean, you can see the difference between the skin tone of my hands and the skin tone of my face on the Xiaomi. Next up, an ultra-wide shot right here, and yes, this is the Museum of Future in Dubai, and man, thing is wild and thing is way bigger than I expected. But yeah, anyways, a major difference right here is that the S22 Ultra maintains the contrast in the scene by not overexposing shadows, and I mean the Xiaomi looks really nice here, I'm not gonna lie. And so in my opinion at least, I think the S22 is doing a better job here, but I guess you could go for the Xiaomi 12 Pro as well if you prefer a slightly more processed look. Here's another ultra wide, and I mean you can see very clearly how the S22 doesn't go too crazy on lifting shadows. It maintains a lot more of their deep rich blacks that I personally like to see a lot. Now yes, Xiaomi does have more detail in the shadows. It does produce slightly more pleasing skin tones in my opinion as well, so that is definitely a plus side on the Xiaomi in terms of the general processing. Now this right here, this was indoors, and yes, the lighting was kind of crazy. Like you can see that weird blue light coming in from the side and the rest of it is pretty warm. I think both are doing a really good job with balancing it out. I had expected some differences to pop up, but I guess not. With the main camera, you're generally going to get very consistently good results. Now then, the zoom test. Well, essentially this is a 1x zoom, and I think the only real difference is in the fact that Xiaomi is kind of warming things up a little too much, in my opinion, compared to the more natural look on the S22 Ultra, and you can see that the sky maintains the rich blue color compared to a slightly desaturated look on the Xiaomi. But then if you zoom in, it actually reverses places right here, because 3x zoom on the S22 is giving us less saturation in the sky now for some odd reason, and Xiaomi is doing a slightly better job at giving us more natural colors. But regardless of that, I think quite simply, if you use the medium range optical zoom on either 3x on the S22, 2x on Xiaomi, you're gonna get immaculately amazing results, and honestly there's really nothing much to complain here. But moving on from there, 10x and anything beyond is the S22 Ultra's playground. Like, it's pretty obvious, and it's basically a huge part of why you're paying so much more, because you get versatility unlike 99% of any phones or flagships out there, and that includes the Xiaomi here as well. And there's a 30x zoom, and it's a huge amount of zoom, and you can see so much. Like, it's not even a comparison at this point. But now, what about high resolution? So here I think Xiaomi is kind of overexposing this shot. There are quite a few blown out highlights, while the S22 is kind of underexposing it, with some of the colors acting a little weird, especially the blue in there. But otherwise, on the detail side of things, I mean, you would expect 108 megapixels to pull ahead compared to 50 on the Xiaomi, but that's not the case. Xiaomi is the one that's giving us a technically sharper result. Now yes, a fair bit of that is digital, and the S22 Ultra looks a lot more natural in that regard. It does produce a very organic result, and if you zoom in, it doesn't look like it's processed all the way to hell. I mean, Xiaomi is not doing a bad job, and considering it's 50 megapixel, it is extremely close to the S22 Ultra, and looking at these two, I would not say that there is a 50 megapixel worth of difference. Next up, an ultra-wide shot, and in this case we are using 50 megapixel mode on the Xiaomi 12 Pro once again. And here, another thing I do want to point out is that Xiaomi has so much more accurate colors and white balance here. Like, even the brightness looks really nice compared to the S22 Ultra, which is really leaning towards the cool side. You can see a lot of the white sunlight looking bluish. Zooming in, however, there is no difference. I don't know why that is the case, and I mean, I really don't understand why something like this is happening, because it's 12 megapixels on the S22 versus 50 on Xiaomi. And I did recheck. Apparently 50 megapixel mode on Xiaomi's ultra wide doesn't really produce any extra detail. I tried it once again in this case as well, and this time I think the S22 Ultra is doing a better job with the white balance. The whites look a lot more natural in my opinion. But once again, you zoom in and okay, maybe there is slightly less over sharpening on Xiaomi 12 Pro. But that really does not tell me that one of them is a 50 megapixel sensor compared to a 12 megapixel sensor. Now you can also use high resolution with the 2x zoom on Xiaomi. And well, for one thing, the S22 Ultra has much more accurate colors, and we are using the 3x zoom here. And well, basically here I wanted to compare how the optical zoom on the S22 Ultra can compare against the 50 megapixel resolution of the Xiaomi 12 Pro. So I matched the framing, zoomed in, and it would appear that using 50 megapixel mode on the 2x zoom camera actually can give you similar level of detail as you would get from 3x optical zoom on the S22. Now granted, 50 megapixel mode is very situational. You cannot always use it, and it can lead to problems with dynamic range and all that jazz. Here's another high-res shot, once again at 2x zoom, and this time I matched the framing while I was taking the shot, so see the exact level of difference. And I think something is very obvious here. The dynamic range issue that I said, when using high resolution, it's quite prominently demonstrated here. Xiaomi's highlights just look crazy weird, and honestly, if the lighting isn't perfect and there's not enough light, the level of detail goes down by a huge bunch, because the moment we zoom in, you can see that the difference in detail, it's not really there. Now, one thing that is severely lacking on the Xiaomi 12 Pro is a good macro mode. And it surprises me because the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra from last year, that thing had a really, well, it was a serviceable macro mode, but at least it had a macro mode. But now we just don't get the option. But now let us move on to human subjects, and we're starting off with selfies. Now the reason the S22 looks a little cropped in is because I used the cropped in mode in this case. But despite that, I would pick the S22 Ultra any day. You see, Xiaomi is really lifting everything up. It looks oddly overexposed while it is also trying to compress the highlights, and I mean, you can see the whites don't exactly look right, the colors are off, and a lot of the blacks just look grayish. You can see that in my hair, my shirt, even in the background. So my pick easily goes to the S22 Ultra here. And well, this is the worst case scenario. This is also slightly backlit, but I mean, you get the point, right? The S22 Ultra is so much better balanced in terms of contrast. Like, it's not even a competition at this point. There's a regular selfie, and the S22 is doing a far better job, and you can also take 40 megapixel shots on the S22 Ultra with the front camera. It kind of suffers with the similar problem as we saw with Xiaomi's high resolution. It doesn't really produce excess amount of detail. Now selfie portraits, well, at least in this case I would say Xiaomi didn't perform terribly, but the S22 Ultra, once again, easy win right here, because it is just balancing out the exposure and contrast so well. Selfies at night, on the other hand, interestingly, we do get a selfie night mode on Xiaomi 12 Pro, and I mean, it's good. It is one of the better night modes that I've seen in smartphones to date, but the S22 Ultra, it is still far better. I would say the S22 has maybe slightly more noise in my shirt, and there is a weird green tinge that can happen sometimes, but if you look at my face, I think it's pretty obvious that we get so much more detail, and just the general colors and skin tones, I think it's a lot more appealing on the S22 Ultra. So the Xiaomi gets close, and it's really nice to see that we are finally getting good selfie night mode on a phone that isn't the S22 Ultra, but I think the S22 is still pretty much ahead in terms of selfie night mode. And of course there's the selfie portrait night mode, which is also incredible on the S22 Ultra. I mean, it's pretty obvious right here. You can see the blown out highlights on the Xiaomi. Doesn't exactly look nice. It does have a much more smooth look to it. It also means slightly less noise on my shirt, but the S22 by far is much better skin tones, much better black levels. I think the S22 takes a pretty easy win right here as well. Now for rear camera portraits, now this is a very simple one, to be entirely honest. Slightly backlit, but I think both are doing a pretty good job with that regard. But if I were to nitpick, maybe I would say once again Xiaomi is really lifting things up. It kind of lacks contrast compared to the S22 Ultra, so maybe this is just a personal opinion, but I prefer S22 Ultra's method here with contrast especially, and I also prefer the slightly more saturated skin tones. Now in this case we use the zoomed in lenses, and well, I didn't think lighting would be this weirdly interpreted on the Xiaomi 12 Pro. The S22 Ultra right here is the accurate one, while the Xiaomi, for some reason, it is changing the red to look like that weird magenta pink. Like, I don't even know how it did that, but it managed to do it, and it's obviously inaccurate and definitely not what was actually happening in the scene. Now finally, I did tell you that there were gonna be some backlit shots, and right here is one of them. And it's a pretty good shot to really differentiate between the two. You can see the S22 Ultra does a far better job at handling that backlight and making sure that it doesn't make me, which is the subject, look too faded like Xiaomi. I mean, look, so far Xiaomi hasn't been particularly good with just human subjects in general, whether it's selfies or portraits, so I think that's one of the key areas where the S22 Ultra is pulling ahead. And that's not to even say that we get night mode portraits on the S22 Ultra. Now, one good thing about Xiaomi would probably be the fact that it is slightly brightening up the shadows, as you know, upping the exposure on my face. But because of that, we're getting far more blown out highlights, and you know, the saturation is really low, doesn't really look nice, and the white balance is also not quite accurate. Now here is another night mode portrait. This time we're using the zoomed in lenses, and one of the things that I think we should keep in mind is that Dubai nightscape in general is very bright. Like, even the streetlights are far brighter compared to those we see in India. Had I shot this photograph in India, there is a very good chance that the S22 Ultra's photo would not have come out looking nearly as nice as it does right here, because when I shot it, we had enough light to really bring out all of those details while using the telephoto camera, and that is generally not the case here. Now for regular night mode, we are starting off with a very difficult shot. So here, most of the things that you're seeing in the foreground, it was all in the dark, while there was this pretty strong highlight at the very center. Now I think both are doing a pretty good job, except for the highlight in case of Xiaomi. That's the only real difference that I see, other than maybe some of the colors being a little subdued as well. But yeah, for the most part, other than the highlight, I think, you know, Xiaomi's night mode, considering the pretty hard situation that this is doing a really good job. But you know, credit where due, this S22 Ultra is doing a better job, so it does pull ahead. Now in this case, I would say that the lighting plays a huge role. It is a night mode shot obviously, but I think Xiaomi is doing a much better job compared to the S22 Ultra, because it is not overdoing it with the colors. It is pulling back the saturation and making things look very natural, and you know, none of it feels over the top. Like, if you look at the blue, especially around the floor on the S22 Ultra, that is oversaturated, and I think Xiaomi is taking a win right here. And now, an ultra-wide shot. I mean, look, who's been to Dubai and not taken this photograph, am I right? I mean, there's no real reason not to. It is just such an incredible place, right? So, anyways, I think a major area where Xiaomi is pulling ahead here, and it's one of the things that I really like about Xiaomi's night mode, is that quite simply, it manages to keep the night sky dark. It looks like it's nighttime compared to this crazy grayish, like really brightened night sky on the S22 Ultra, which I'm personally not a huge fan of. That's not to even mention the difference in detail. Like, this is a 500% crop, and you can see that Xiaomi does have far more detail preservation compared to the S22 Ultra. I think that's in part because, you know, the hardware that is sensor on Xiaomi is a little bit better compared to the S22 Ultra's ultra-wide. Now here's another ultra-wide shot, and I mean, you can see for yourself why I like the Xiaomi 12 Pro so much. It doesn't overexpose the night skies. It looks very much like night mode, but you know, without the excess noise, without the detail loss. I mean, this is exactly how I'd want night shots to look like. Now, this was a tricky situation. There's a lot of warm lights across that river, and basically I think Xiaomi is once again pulling ahead. I think it's pretty obvious as well, like that crazy blue sky. I don't even know why S22 Ultra decided to do that. It really doesn't make any sense to me, because obviously Xiaomi is much more accurate. It is giving us a really beautiful gradient. Maybe the only real good thing about the S22 Ultra would be that it is handling the warmth slightly better from those street lights, but that's hardly gonna make up for that amazing night sky. I think that's one of the major reasons why I feel Xiaomi has just a definitively better night mode compared to the S22 Ultra. And to think, the moment I say that, we move on to an indoors night mode shot and this is the result. I think it's pretty obvious that the S22 Ultra is doing a slightly better job this time around, because yes, the lighting is crazy. That's the whole point of taking this image. And Xiaomi, I think it's just trying to overcompensate for it, and in that regard it is crushing the shadows, and the S22 is much more true to the scene, and I think it does a better job in that regard. Now then, finally we are going to check out zoom. Here we have 3x on the S22, 2x on the Xiaomi, and easily the Xiaomi is going to be my pick. And it's not because of the zoom range or anything like that. It's quite simply a better looking image with much better contrast compared to the S22 Ultra. I mean, it's almost ironical because during the daytime, Xiaomi's images lacked contrast. In this case, at night, Xiaomi's the one pulling ahead. But of course, if you want to use 10x zoom, there's really no other phone like the S22 Ultra now, is there? I mean, this is a 10x night mode shot and you can see the immaculately beautiful detail. Like, that is an amazing shot, and I doubt there are many phones out there that can handle something like this. Now finally, for the moon. Well, it's pretty obvious. I'm gonna go with the S22 Ultra right here. It's an age-old thing of better contrast. I mean, look, I've never exactly figured out why Xiaomi likes to make the night sky look gray in moonshots, because it does a really good job with night mode night skies. So yeah, I've never been able to make any sense out of that, but in this case, the S22 Ultra, straight out the camera, it does a better job. But you can just, increase the contrast, maybe crush the shadows on the Xiaomi to get a better image. You can use 100x zoom on the S22 Ultra, and I would recommend sticking with 30x even on the S22 Ultra, because it's going to give you more consistent results, because as you can see right here, 100x kind of warms up the moon for some weird reason and makes it look beige compared to white. So that is the end of this camera comparison, and I personally believe that the Xiaomi 12 Pro is going to really appeal to those who prefer taking night shots. Involving the night sky in particular, then the Xiaomi 12 Pro wins by landslide compared to the S22 Ultra. Keeping that in mind, the Xiaomi 12 Pro also doesn't fare particularly well when it comes to stuff like portraits or selfies in particular, and those are some of the things that many people care about. And if it is something you care about, then maybe it's gonna be worthwhile for you to shell out the extra bit of cash for the S22 Ultra. It really gives you a very rounded off experience with regards to human subjects. And add to that, we also have that incredible versatility both at night and during daytime. I think it all counts towards a really good camera. With that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers!